I am a lawyer, but I am not necessarily your lawyer. The materials discussed in this podcast are for informational purposes only and should not be deemed legal advice. If you have a specific legal question according to your circumstances, then I encourage you to speak with an attorney licensed in your jurisdiction. All right, welcome back to Ag Law Today. We have a very special guest coming from us from Arkansas. We have Beth Rumley with the National Agriculture Law Center. Beth, why don't you give us a quick introduction about yourself and what you do there at the National Ag Law Center?
Hi, Carrie. Thanks for the invitation to talk with you today. I am a senior staff attorney here at the National Agricultural Law Center. We're located in Fayetteville, Arkansas. And my work here at the center involves research and information and education in the field of agricultural law. My particular focus is on legal issues in animal agriculture, but I do a little bit of everything. Between all of us, we cover a lot of ground, obviously, because agricultural law is such a broad field to be working with.
Yeah, it is. And by the way, people sometimes ask me, what is agricultural law? And when people ask you that, how do you respond?
That's a really hard question, and we get that a lot, and we usually end up saying what isn't agricultural law. It touches everything from production to processing, from agriculture to food, and the laws that affect every component of all of those things. And so it can be anything from estate planning on one day to food safety on another to fence laws on another day.
Yeah, exactly. So a lot of folks don't know anything about the National Ag Law Center. So tell us, how are you guys even funded?
Well, we are funded through a combination of public and private support. We're supported in part by the federal government, state funds, as well as private supporters.
And how big is your staff there in Arkansas?
In terms of full-time folks, at the moment we have 4. We have the director, as well as 2 senior staff attorneys and a communications person. But we also employ anywhere between 7 to 15 law students at any point in time. And we're all working with one goal, and that is to improve the resources that are available to folks not only on our website, but also in the in-person meetings that we frequently lecture at.
So it sounds like you guys are really just involved from the educational perspective. Does the National Ag Law Center get it all involved with lobbying?
Absolutely not. And that's one of the things that I think is most interesting or most important to us here at the center, is we are a completely nonpartisan, non-advocacy organization. So we are not in a position, we are not in a role to tell anybody about what the law should be. Instead, we tell people about what the law is. What is it that you're working with now, rather than what it might be changed to in the future. So we are not in an advocacy position. We aren't trying to suggest changes to anything. We're just saying this is sort of what you're dealing with as we speak.
So I know you briefly covered this before, but can you expand a little bit about your particular role with the National Ag Law Center and sort of the experiences that you've had?
Well, it's sort of as wide-ranging as the idea of what is agricultural law. I do a lot of different things. I do some research and writing. A lot of what we do is writing things like fact sheets or white papers or articles or even blog posts dealing with agricultural law happenings. So it could be anything from a case that is recently decided to a statute that is pending to things that happen, statutes that were passed 100 years ago, which is what I just got off the phone with the gentleman who was asking questions about.
Oh no, 100 years ago, that does not sound fun. So what services in particular do you offer to agriculture producers?
Well, the majority of our resources are available on our website, and the website is nationalaglawcenter.org. That's nationalaglawcenter.org. And when you go to that website, over on the left-hand side is the menu that has the majority of our resources. And you can click on the different links there. We have everything from what we call our reading rooms to Congressional Research Service reports to a listing of every farm bill, the language of every farm bill that's ever been passed. So the resources that we have and that we offer, for the most part, the majority of them are meant to be accessible to anybody. So you don't need to have a law degree in order to read and understand the things that we put together. Our focus and our goal is making sure that they're accessible to anybody who wants to read them, anybody who wants to access them. Obviously, we're more successful on that with the things that we write than necessarily when we post a statute or when we post a regulation, because we have no say in what kind of language those are posted in. But there should be enough on our website to make a producer or anybody that's accessing it more familiar with the topic that they're looking for.
So can farmers or ranchers just ring up and call the National Ag Law Center and ask legal questions?
Well, you can. That is one option. You can call us, and if it is not a situation where we'd have to give legal advice, then we are happy to point you in the direction of the resources that we have to offer. Unfortunately, a lot of times when people call, they're looking for legal advice that's specific to their situation. Because of the way the center is organized as a research and information institution, we are not allowed to give legal advice. Not only that, but we're not licensed in all 50 states, so we might get in trouble for giving legal advice in more ways than one. So if it is something that requires legal advice, we will typically refer you to either an attorney in your state that we know of, or we will put you in touch with the American Agricultural Law Association, which is an industry group of attorneys that practice ag law across the country. And I will usually send out a message on the listserv asking if anybody is interested in talking to you about your issue to contact me, and I will get you in touch with attorneys in that way. So our goal is to make sure that somebody is there to talk to you. Unfortunately, it can't be us when you're asking for specific legal advice.
That makes a lot of sense. So let's shift gears and talk about the reading rooms, which is available on the website. And 9 years ago, when I first started my law practice, one of the first things I did was I started an ag law blog. And I was brainstorming about what do I write about. And I actually went to the National Ag Law Center's reading room, and I just started getting ideas of what was happening in the ag law industry. It's a fantastic resource, Beth. And why don't you tell us a little bit more about it?
Absolutely, I'd be happy to. The reading rooms are actually something that are one of my favorite parts of the website, one that I think is very important to anybody who's interested in learning more about a specific area of ag law. So when you go to the website at nationalaglawcenter.org and you go over to the left-hand side in that menu, it says research by topic. You click on that and it will take you to a list of what we call our reading rooms, and there's somewhere around 50 of them. Each reading room is specific to one area of agricultural law. So there's a reading room, for example, on dealing with animal welfare. There's one dealing with Packers and Stockyards Act. There's one dealing with environmental law, and there's one dealing with PACA or water law. Lots of different options. And each reading room is set up in the same way. When you click on the link, it will take you first to an overview. And that overview just gives a short explanation of what the legal issues are that's involved with animal welfare, for example. Below that, we have a list of the statutes or the laws that are important for animal welfare or whatever topic it is that you're looking for, as well as the regulations and case law. Below that, we have bibliography, which is a listing of law review or legal type articles that have been written about it. And at the very bottom, we have what we call reference resources, which are links to places across the web, everything from governmental to industry to international, and different organizational resources dealing with that area of ag law. Our goal with these reading rooms are not that you're able to act as your own attorney. You're not going to know all of the law by the time you get done reading it. But instead, our goal is that you can look at these reading rooms and get an understanding of what the basic issues are and the basic organizational knowledge that you need to then go to an attorney and not have to pay for that basic knowledge. So you have that understanding so you can put together your issues and ask a question that's understandable and then can be taken and legal advice can be given from that question.
From an attorney's perspective, I believe that this resource is fantastic. I remember the very first time I had a draft a farm lease, one of the first things I did was I went to the ag leases portion of the reading room and I checked it out. And I also have to say that when my clients come to me and they're already educated on a particular topic, we're able to really hone into the exact legal questions that they need addressed.
And they can be addressed that much quicker if they have that basic understanding. And that's our whole goal with these reading rooms.
So how often are the reading rooms updated?
Well, we try to do it about once a year. Obviously, some things don't change quite as often, and some things change even more frequently than once a year. Whenever there's a really big change, we get to it a little bit quicker, but it's basically a once a year schedule.
So if an attorney listener or an ag producer finds another great resource on one of these topics, should they contact you and let you know?
Absolutely. We would love to have them send that on. They can send me an email. My email address is E, as short for Elizabeth, RUM as in Mary, LEY. So that's erumley at uark.edu. If you go to the homepage, the nationalaglawcenter.org, down at the bottom there should be a contact us link. You can send something to there as well, and I'll get it either way.
Fantastic. To shift gears slightly, I know that the National Ag Law Center has historically put on a few webinars. What types of webinars has the National Ag Law Center organized?
Well, they're on almost any topic you can think of. We have these webinars either once or twice a month, and they are on every topic from aquaculture to GMOs to cottage food laws. We have one that is coming up on international trade. We just had one on international trade. We have another one coming up on labor, ag labor, as well as a lot of different other topics. And they, as I said, are either once or twice a month. Usually I'm typically on a Wednesday. And if you go to our webpage, down right below the list on the left-hand side of the page is a box that says something about the webinars. If you click on that, it will take you to our list both of upcoming webinars as well as the list of the webinars that we have already had.
And how much do they cost?
They're absolutely free. You can just log on at the time that the webinar is. They're typically at noon Eastern, and just listen in for an hour. If you're not able to listen at that time, you can go back at any time because we record all of them, and the link is accessible on that screen.
That's fantastic. And I'm guessing they're not just for attorneys, is that right? Anybody can listen?
Anybody can listen. In fact, we try to extend our requirement that you don't have to have a law degree in order to access our materials, and we try to make sure that whoever it is that's giving the webinar gives it in a way that is understandable to anybody who wants to listen.
Let's talk a little bit more about the National Ag Law Center's outreach projects. How often are you or somebody else at the National Ag Law Center presenting at conferences and workshops? I know that we met through the American Ag Law Association, I believe, at one of their annual meetings. But how often are you guys participating in similar activities?
It depends on the week. Sometimes it's twice a week. Sometimes it's once every 2 weeks. But it's very, very frequently. We talk at conferences and events all across the country on a lot of different topics dealing with agricultural law. The other senior staff attorney, Rusty, in the month of January, for example, he traveled all the way from Savannah, Georgia to Tennessee to California to Alaska within 1 month. And so that was a little bit extreme, but it's a good example of the wide expanse of things that we do and the things that we talk about.
Do you guys post your presentations online?
Not typically, because a lot of them are specific to the organization that we are talking to. The ones that have more of a broad view, the more of a broad draw, we typically turn into things like fact sheets or articles and post, but the presentations themselves we don't usually post.
So if somebody listening out there wants the National Ag Law Center to come and speak on a particular legal issue, how can they go about contacting you to do that?
Same thing, just send me an email or send the National Ag Law Center itself an email. And that email address is located down at the very bottom of our webpage. It's nataglaw@uark.edu.
What are the most common questions that you receive from agriculture producers? I'm very curious about this one.
Well, a little bit of everything. As I said, I got off the phone maybe 15 minutes ago with somebody who had a question about a levy district in the state of Arkansas, a law that was passed in 1893. Earlier this morning, I had a question about a fence law in Utah. And a little bit before that, I had a call from DC with some farm bill questions. So that's just what today has looked like. In terms of sort of broad picture, I think probably the biggest questions that we receive, or the most frequent questions that we receive, deal with right to farm, so ag nuisance, estate planning, and probably contract questions would be a third one. So not only land lease contracts, but also production contracts of different forms.
So do you see those as being the biggest legal issues affecting agriculture producers, or would you throw in a few other legal issues there into the mix?
I would say that right to farm is definitely one of the bigger issues that people are facing, just as the rural-urban divide gets a little bit closer and closer every day. I think environmental compliance is one that I would throw in there, because it's just so important to producers or landowners or anybody who is involved in governmental programs. But yeah, I think, and definitely estate planning. I would call that my third most important issue for producers, both estate and transition planning.
You know, Beth, when I speak on farm, estate, and succession planning, I'm always a little afraid to ask people that by a show of hands, how many people have nothing, because I feel like it's a lot higher than what anyone in the industry wants to admit. So why do you think, out of curiosity, why do you think that people put off farm, estate, succession planning off?
I think it's for the same reason that we have so many people, just generally speaking, that don't have wills. It's hard to admit that there's going to be an end. And with agriculture, I think it's even easier not to admit it, because it's sort of difficult to retire from ag. There's many ways to continue working, even if you don't work to the same extent that you do when you're 30 or 40. So I think it's sort of a combination of those things.
Yeah, that's a good point. My father was actually at my farm last weekend helping me trim my goat hooves. And I made some kind of comment to my mother about wondering when my father's going to retire from farming. And she said probably when he's 80 or 85. And, this is a very common situation.
And even then, probably when he's 85.
Yeah.
As long as he's not even acknowledging that will happen.
This is not the truth. So what advice do you have for farmers and ranchers from coast to coast who are looking for the right attorney to give them guidance on their particular situation?
Well, I think that the first thing to do is to cast a wide net. Depending on the topic, especially if you're dealing with some things like federal program payments or PACA or other things that are federal specific, the person may not be located in your area. Because if you have a question about the Perishable Ag Commodities Act or PACA, then it might be somebody who focuses just on TACA in one specific area of the country, or if you, same thing with federal farm program payments. But if it is something that's a little bit more local, so if you're dealing with a zoning issue or a fence law issue or a contracts issue, then you're probably going to want somebody that's in your area. Some ways to find them is one, through the through the American Agricultural Law Association. When you go to their website, down at the very bottom, because as you said, we're both members of this group, down at the very bottom is a map on the right-hand side. When you click on the map, you can zoom in and find out if there are any members in your area, and you can contact the members directly. So that's one way of finding people.
And Beth, I just want to interject real quick. The website for the American Ag Law Association is aglaw-assn.org. So that's aglaw-assn.org. Go ahead, Beth.
I know, it's not a real roll off your tongue website address. If you type in American Ag Law Association into Google, it'll get you the same thing.
Yeah, easily.
That's what I tell people, just because it's so difficult to find that other way. But anyway, down at the bottom, you can click on a link and it will send you to people that are in your area. If they can't help you, maybe they're able to come up with somebody else, either that they work with or that they know that might be more of a suitable fit for what your problem is. Another way is either through local bar associations or state bar associations. Many times, either local or state bar associations have ag law sections, which are people who focus on ag law or have an interest in ag law. And they can sometimes send you to people who are signed up or active in those sections, if that's what you're looking for.
Any tips for interviewing lawyers?
Well, my suggestions would be ask them about the cases that they have or that they typically see. If you have a zoning question and you are going to an attorney that just practices estate planning, then it's not likely going to be the perfect fit for your issue. So ask about the cases that they usually see, if they have agricultural law cases, if they have zoning cases, or what it is that their typical day looks like. You can also ask them if they have any other specialized knowledge. There are LLMs in agricultural law, there's LLMs in environmental law, there's LLMs in tax law, which are advanced degrees in that area of law. So that might be helpful to you depending on what your issue is, what your question is. And I think the most important thing that I would suggest is ask what are the alternatives for solving the problem. Because while going to court is always a possibility, it's not necessarily, and in fact it isn't usually, the best option. So there's many things that you can do and many steps that you can take before you have to do that nuclear option of taking this case to court. So if you ask about these alternatives on the front end, it's hopefully going to be cheaper, and the fact that the attorney recognizes that you are looking for alternative solutions is going to be something that's important moving forward with that relationship.
Yeah. Amen to that. I feel like people, and a lot of lawyers, are much too anxious to go to court to try to solve problems, and the court is not the answer to solve all disputes, that's for sure. Beth, I know that you already gave your contact information earlier in the podcast, but why don't you go ahead and restate in case people didn't have a pin on how they can contact you or the National Ag Law Center?
Okay, well, the easiest way to do it is to go to our website, which is nationalaglawcenter.org. Scroll all the way down to the bottom. There's a phone number and an email address for the main center phone number, the main center email address. Go ahead and send us a call, give us a call or send us an email to that address. I will get it. It goes straight to my email. So I'll get it that way. If you wanted to send me specifically an email, you can send it to erumley@uark.edu. That's erumley@uark.edu. And I'll be happy to get back to you then. Again, we're not allowed to give legal advice, but we can give information and resources, and hopefully, if you have a question, send you in the direction of somebody who is able to actually give you that advice that you're looking for.
I'm so glad that you guys are there and ready to offer the education and those resources to not just attorneys, but also to producers as well. Beth, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate having you.
Thanks for having me, Carrie. I appreciate being on here, and I hope to hear from folks who have questions or anything that we can help with. Thank you.
All right, our next question is a popular one that I get quite often. It comes to us from someone from Oregon. She asks, what is the difference between an employee and an independent contractor? I think that this particular entrepreneur is having some difficulty with a current independent contractor. And I just wanted to know, this is a complex and often a litigated issue. The litigation can vary from state to state. In some states like New York, there's been a lot of litigation in this area. But the key word here on trying to decide if somebody is an employee or an independent contractor is the word control. Do you have control over when, where, and how this person works? So I'll give you an example. When I first started my law practice, I was about 4 years in before I hired my first secretary. But she was a part-time secretary, but I had control over when she worked. We talked about her hours. She was going to work 20 hours a week. She was going to work from 10 to 3 in the middle of the days or whatever it was. She was going to come physically to my office, and I told her what to do and how to do it. She used my computer screen, right? And so she was an employee. She was not an independent contractor. And so, and I understand why entrepreneurs feel the urge to want to pay people as an independent contractor versus an employee. I mean, I'm an employer myself as well, and payroll is a mess to have to deal with all those other regulations and withholdings and Social Security and blah, blah, blah. The list goes on. But I can tell you, if you as an employer have control over when, where, and how a person that works for you works, then they're most likely an employee and not an independent contractor. A second key question is are they doing the same thing for other people? So going back to the example of my secretary, was she going out to go work with a bunch of other attorneys doing the same thing? The answer to that question was no. But I will tell you that I know virtual secretaries who work from their own house, who are taking on jobs for, like, let's say 5 lawyers throughout the week. They're feeding them jobs to do, and they work on an hourly basis. In that scenario, that person is absolutely an independent contractor. I don't know when she works. I don't know how she does it. I don't have control over the software or the computer. She's doing the same job for other people. That person is an independent contractor. But if someone's coming to your farm and you talk about the hours, you talk about where they're going to work, how they're going to work, they're most likely an employee. Clear as mud? So if there's ever any question in this area, not only should you talk to an attorney who's licensed in your jurisdiction, but I would err on the side of identifying people that work for you as an employee versus an independent contractor. If you have a question that you would like for me to address on this podcast, please email me at carrie@rinkerlaw.com. Please be sure to put Ask Carrie in the subject line so I know what you are referencing. So again, that email is Carrie, spelled C-A-R-I, at rinkerlaw.com, spelled RINCKERLAW.com. You can also find me and all my links from my social media platforms on my website, rinkerlaw.com. You can hit me up on Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram, and even YouTube. And you can also subscribe to this podcast on YouTube as well. Looking forward to the conversation. See you there.